Hello, welcome again to the Podcast Podcast, where we answer your questions about personal injury cases. I'm your host, Rusty Messer with Big River Trial Attorneys in Baton Rouge. We're joined by our co-host, Maria, our client support specialist. Maria, what are we talking about today?
Who can be held liable when a commercial plane crashes?
That's a great question. We had a lot of contact and interest in this, probably, unfortunately, off of what happened in India recently. Of course, if you haven't heard already, there was a tragic air crash in India. Almost everyone on the plane died. One person in the seat 11A survived. Of course, I can't really talk to you about what would happen in India or the law of other countries, but I can explain to you what would happen if you were in the US involved in a crash or if you were traveling abroad from the US. The first thing to be thinking about is who can be held liable. There may be several parties involved. It might be easy to say, oh, it's the airline, but it may not be the airline. So of course you have the airline, they're responsible for mechanics, they're responsible for parts, maintenance, but they may contract some of those things out. Of course, the airplane is being flown by a pilot. That pilot is probably an employee of the airline. But just saying the airline may not cover everybody who actually had input in that plane getting off the ground. Going back beyond just the airlines and the pilots, you look at the aircraft manufacturers. Obviously, the airlines don't make the airplanes. They buy them from Boeing or other companies like that. And sometimes there's faulty manufacturing that causes a plane to fail. So you look at the manufacturers, you may look at maintenance companies along the way, where there are maintenance companies that work on the plane before it got to the airline. At that airline flying that plane around the country to different airports, there may be different companies actually doing the maintenance on that through contracts they have with the airline. After that, you probably have air traffic controllers, maybe other governmental agencies. We'll talk some more about that in a minute. So you can have the aircraft owner, if you're on a larger airline, that's going to be, an international company. But if you're on a smaller craft, that may just be a private owner, or maybe a smaller company that owns 3 or 4 private jets. So you can have the owner, and you can have the operators and the vendors. So in that situation where maybe there's a private owner, maybe they've contracted pilots on, or maybe they've contracted other vendors to come in and provide those services. First thing you have to do is figure out who, and not just one party, but what parties are you going to bring your claim against before you can even think about recovering damages.
What kind of damage can people make claims for?
The recoverable damages, if you're on a domestic flight in the US, are generally pretty similar to what we see in other types of injury claims. So in a commercial airplane crash, you can seek your medical expenses. If you were fortunate enough to not die in the crash and have medical expenses, you can seek those. Lost income, future earnings, pain and suffering. If the worst happened, your family can seek funeral and burial costs, loss of claims for loss of companionship, loss of consortium, those types of things. Now, where it gets a little bit dicey is if you are more than 3 miles out from the coast, they are going to raise a defense called the Death on the High Seas Act, or DOSA. And DOSA can limit your claims to pecuniary damages, like financial losses. So under a DOSA claim, there is no pain and suffering. There is no wrongful death claim. It's really just about that amount of money that you might have produced over your life for other economic type damages.
Are there different steps involved if you're suing the government?
So anytime you're dealing with your major airlines, you're going to run into a claim involving the government. It's going to come under something called the Federal Tort Claims Act. Now, a Federal Tort Claims Act, you can't just go down and file a lawsuit. You have to put the government on notice. There's a certain format that it has to be in, And once you put the government on notice, they have 6 months to act on your claim, either to accept it, which they never do, or deny it, or sometimes they just don't do anything. But you have to wait that 6 months. Once that 6 months runs, then you can file your lawsuit. So it's not as like maybe a trucking accident or a car accident where it's happened and you can just immediately go down to the courthouse and sue the person that has caused it. Once the government becomes involved, you're dealing with a different procedural process. Some of the things that people in Baton Rouge should know if you are involved in a commercial accident, a commercial airplane accident. Act quickly. Evidence will disappear quickly, right? A lot of the evidence was probably destroyed at the crash scene. Of course, everybody has heard about the black boxes. So you're going to want to act quickly in collecting that evidence, speaking with somebody about what claims you have, what evidence needs to be preserved. Types of evidence that need to be gathered. Sometimes there's cockpit voice recorders. There can be maintenance logs. Of course, we talked about the black box. Anytime there's a crash like that, an agency is going to come out and do an investigation. You want to get a copy of that investigation. What did they find out? What did they attribute the cause of this crash to? And probably one of the biggest things that I can say to people is don't trust just any attorney on a commercial airplane crash, right? This is not like an auto accident. This is not like a trucking accident, as complex as those are. This is a very unique specialty. You're going to want lawyers who have experience specifically in suing airlines over crashes. And please do not trust your neighbor's nephew who does family law and a little bit of personal injury on the side. They're not even going to know where to begin. So if you or someone you know has had the unfortunate of being involved in a commercial airline accident, hopefully there were no deaths, but if there were, whatever the case, make sure that you speak with an attorney who specializes in handling airplane crashes. Again, I can't stress it enough. This is not like other types of injury claims. All right, fantastic question. It's tragic that we're talking about this following what happened in India. Prayers to the families of all those involved. If you found this useful, make sure to like and subscribe. You can catch this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Again, I'm Rusty Messer with Big River Trial Attorneys, and we will see you next time on the Podcast Podcast.